Radhaman Hava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Prajajanarandana Yashodanandana Prajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Prajajanarandana Yashodanandana Prajajanarandana Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janava Lava Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Prajajanarandana Yashodanandana Prajajanarandana Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare John Vishnupada, Pramsa Virakacharya Sotashata Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada, Pramsa Virakacharya Sotashata Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Pramanande Hari Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 15, Narada and Angira instruct King Chitraketu. Texts 20 through 23. So I'll just read the first three and then repeat the last verse. Tadeva te param jnanam dadami graham agata Yatvaya bine veshamte putram eva dadami aham aduna putrinam tapo vavatai vanubuyate evam dada griharayo vividashvarya sampada Shabdadayascha Vishaya Tala Raja Vibhutaya Mahirajam Balam Kosho Mrityamatya Suristana Sarve Pishura Sene Me Shokamoha Yartida Andaravanagra Pradhya Swapanamaya Manorata Sarve Pishura Sene Me Shokamoha Vayartida Gandharva Nagara Prakya Swapnamaya Manorata Sarve Pishura Sene Me Shokamoha Vayartida Gandharva Nagara Prakya Swapanamaya Manorata. Word for word. Aduna. At the present moment. Utrinam. Of persons who have children. Tapa. The tribulation. Bhavata, by you, eva, indeed, anubhuyate, is experienced, evam, in this way, dara, good wife, griha, residence, raya, riches, vividha, various, Aishvarya, opulences, Sampada, prosperities, Shabda Adya, sound, and so on, Cha, and Vishaya, the objects of sense gratification, Kala, temporary, Rajya, of the kingdom, Vibhutaya, opulences, Mahi, land, Rajyam, kingdom, Balam, strength, Kosha, treasury, Britya, servants, Amatya, ministers, Suritjana, allies, Sarve, all, Api, indeed, Shurasena, O king of Shurasena, Ime, these, Shoka, of lamentation, Moha, of illusion, Bhaya, of fear, Arti, and distress, Ga, givers, Gandharva Nagara Prakya, headed by the illusory sight of a Gandharva Naga, a big palace within the forest. Swapna, dreams, Maya, illusions, Manorata, and concoctions of the mind. Translations and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. When I first came to your home, I could have given you the supreme transcendental knowledge. But when I saw that your mind was absorbed in material things, I gave you only a son who caused you jubilation and lamentation. My dear king, now you are actually experiencing the misery of a person who has sons and daughters. O king, owner of the state of Shurasen, one's wife, his house, the opulence of his kingdom, and his various other opulences and objects of sense perception are all the same in that they are temporary. One's kingdom, military power, treasury, servants, ministers, friends, and relatives are all causes of fear, illusion, lamentation, and distress. They are like a Gandharva Nagra, a non-existent palace that one imagines to exist in the forest. Because they are impermanent, they are no better than illusions, dreams, and mental concoctions. Purport. This verse describes the entanglement of material existence. In material existence, the living entity possesses many things. The material body, children, wife, and so on. Dehapatya kaladrishu. One may think that these will give him protection, but that is impossible. In spite of all these possessions, the spirit soul has to give up his present situation and accept another. The next situation may be unfavorable, and even if it is favorable, one must give it up and again accept another body. In this way, one's tribulation in material existence continues. A sane man should be perfectly aware that these things will never be able to give him happiness. One must be situated in his spiritual identity and eternally serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a devotee. Angira Rishi and Narada Muni gave this instruction to Maharaj Chitraketu. Om Agina Tiramandasya Yananchana Shlakaya Prakshumatayam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we are continuing with the instructions of Narada and Angira to King Chitraketu after he lost his son due to the poisoning by the other wives. And they are making the point that when they first came, or when Angira Rishi first came, he could have straight away instructed Maharaj Chitraketu in this transcendental knowledge. But the king's mind was so absorbed in material things that he could not have mm, actually listened to that knowledge. That first he had to experience the misery, experience the lamentation of this material world before he was able to actually understand the transcendental knowledge. Because being a king, he was in many ways a very comfortable position. He had his military power, he had his kingdom, he had his wealth, his servants, ministers, friends, relatives, the respect of his subjects, probably the respect of other kings in the area. He was cultured enough to please Angira Rishi, so he probably had the respect of the Brahmanas as well. And except for this one small thing of not having a son, he thought his life was pretty good. And that, oh, if I just have this one thing, then my life will be complete, and I will be able to be happy in this material world. And as long as he was thinking like this, as long as he didn't have that experience, he would not have actually been able to take to heart the words of Angira. He likely would have listened very respectably or respectfully. As I was saying, he's a very cultured sort of person. So yes, yes, um, oh, great Ricci, your words are true. You are speaking what is in the revealed scriptures. And I totally agree with everything that you say. But who knows if the behavior, if the consciousness of trying to enjoy would have actually changed, or if he would have still held on to this desire of, I will be happy once I have a son. This is one of the examples of actually why we are so fortunate to live in the age of Kali. Because there are so many miseries here that it is very difficult for somebody who is even a little bit intelligent to keep the illusion that this world is a place of enjoyment. You know, we aren't arrayed by kingdoms, military power, treasuries, servants, etc. There are barely any kingdoms actually left. Everything has become democracies. And as such, the people have lost their protection and are suffering in so many ways. The state of society, the state of, you know, even our bodies, there are so many miseries incumbent upon us today. Even the basic things, being able to get, good food, living in unpolluted environments is practically impossible. Even if one, for example, goes to the grocery store to get so-called fresh vegetables, how many trucks and intercontinental journeys have those vegetables been on so that you can get strawberries in the middle of winter or something like that? And so many other examples. I'm sure I don't have to um, talk about the various miseries and the inconveniences of the age of Kali for people to understand that this is a very miserable condition that we are living in. And of course, in one sense, that is very inauspicious. The age of Kali is not meant for gentlemen or ladies. But on the other hand, if we are sober about things, we can understand by this experience that this material world is not the place to be, that it is not a place for us to reside permanently, that there actually is no enjoyment or happiness in this material world, that no matter how we may adjust our lives, that this place is simply a place of suffering, and it's better just to get out once and for all. And even if our position is favorable, of course, in the age of Kali, what position is favorable? Even the greatest world leaders, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Netanyahu, any person who is in power today, how can they compare to somebody like Maharaj Ketu as far as material enjoyment? But even if one is in such a supposedly favorable position, one will be separated from it by death. We've actually experienced every single materially enjoyable thing before. We might not remember it because we have changed bodies since then, and we don't always remember the changes of our bodies, uh, especially if we go from one family to another, especially one species of life to another. But every enjoyable thing in this material world we have experienced before. The perfect sexual partner, the height of power, extreme wealth, the ability to fly, mystic cities, all of these things we have experienced before, and not a single one of them has satisfied us. If we recognize this mm, reality, then we can understand that trying to enjoy in this material world is insane, as Prabhupada uh, explains in the purport, that a sane man should be perfectly aware that these things will never give him happiness. But still, we try to adjust here, there, and everywhere. And in our adjustments, for material happiness, we try to, or we end up creating more and more problems. Because trying to work against uh, Krishna's system in one way or another always leads to more and more issues. We want to make the journey from one place to another easier. So he invents all these contraptions like cars, for example, in order to do that. But in doing so, we make so many uh, issues for ourselves. We make so many more sources of misery. The car, for example, requires maintenance. If it doesn't, it breaks down. Like one of our cars here, the green Prius, has broken down and has become the world's ugliest sculpture by just sitting in front of the men's ashram for weeks on end. Even if it's even if these things are working perfectly, they require so many things. Fuel, for example, which requires such a burden on the earth in order to procure. And then if one requires fuel, one has to have money. And doing money and obtaining money, one has to have a job. And then by the time one is finished with one's job, one is too tired to actually enjoy the car anyway. Uh, and so many other examples that simply by trying to enjoy, we create so many more miseries for ourselves. One can see this in many, many cases in the various social norms that we have today that have totally loosed themselves from the understanding and the restrictions of Dharma. If one thinks, one can find so many examples, specific examples of these things. But in the name of high-sounding ideals, fairness or compassion or freedom, people are simply ruining this life and so many other lives. At the very least, even the lowest sort of person within the Vedic system was at least have some idea of following Dharma in order to have a better next life. That is kind of the bare minimum. Anybody who was lower than that uh, was outside of the Vedic system. But if one analyzes various aspects of society nowadays, it is simply leading people to lower and lower births as animals or ghosts or uh, other sorts of hellish conditions of life. So we should understand and we should explain to others as well. Don't try to adjust so much for material happiness. Take the minimum that you need and accept whatever is coming in material nature. But don't think more and more that I have to chase after this material happiness because you'll never find it. My Guru Maharaj has talked before, he's written in one of his books about maximizers and satisfiers, that for any area of life, you can try to maximize your pleasure, your happiness, or you can just be satisfied with whatever comes. And those that actually are content are the satisficers, are those who are just satisfied with whatever comes their way. Because actually, the amount of material happiness and material distress, it's already predetermined. There's basically nothing you can do to change it. Yes, there are some remedies and things like that, but for a large part, what you are destined to enjoy or suffer in this life, according to the laws of material nature, is already decided. Some of you might know that I've talked to, might know that I am taking a course in Vedic astrology. And just in looking at my own chart, I can see that the various times throughout my life were indicated already by at the very moment I was born, by the position of planets, that the various forms of material happiness and material distress was already there. I did not have to separately endeavor in order to get, these any sort of pleasurable thing, or and no matter how much I endeavored, I couldn't overcome the unpleasurable things. All of these things are already there in the reactions of our karma, the fruits of our previous activities that we are tasting now. But still, we try to maximize our happiness, even though that is impossible. We try, oh, I have to find the perfect partner. Let's search and search and search in order to find somebody that is just right. This whole idea of soulmates that is prevalent in the modern culture, that there's this one person in the entire world that is meant for me, and I am meant for them. And by the union of with each other, we will be perfectly happy. It, and as soon as you see somebody who is attractive come along, oh, this is my soulmate. And then when that situation inevitably fails, you find somebody else. Oh, this is my soulmate. I was wrong the last 15 times, but I'm right this time. This is my soulmate, and I'll be perfectly happy with them. All the while, it is just lust for the body. Uh, one can analyze this in any area of life. Oh, if I have the perfect job, I'll be happy. Then you have a so-called fulfilling job, and then your boss is a jerk, or even you have a good boss. How year after year you become bored with it, and then it's just a slog to get to work every day. But you still have to, because you have the mortgage and you have the car payments and you have all of these other responsibilities and entanglements. That is the name of the game with material existence. Simply entanglement. And that the more and more we try to enjoy, the more and more we're stuck. It's like quicksand. If you try to fight your way out of quicksand, you're more and more entangled. You sink more and more. And the material energy is just like that. The more we try to adjust for our material happiness, the more we try, the more we end up being stuck in our miseries. And any sort of happiness there is in this material world is very temporary. Even if one has the lifetime and the lifestyle of a demigod, one still has to fall down from that position. So we should become actually sane and stop trying to enjoy this material world. We should very intently study the books of Srila Prabhupada, who not only gives us the mm, ultimate goal of Krishna consciousness, of totally coming out of material world, but even through his teachings on how to live a dharmic lifestyle, teaches us how to interact in the material world in a way that is least entangling. It still is entangling because everything about the material world is entangling. If one touches fire, one automatically gets burned. But at least the laws of Dharma have as their goal and their direction of life Krishna consciousness. If one is working in the Daivavan ashram system, so we should very intently study Srila Prabhupada's books and take up this process of Krishna consciousness and become sane, become very philosophical. One can analyze basically anything in this material world and see how it's simply cheating and misery. And we should actually do this in our own life if there is anything that we are uh, attached to. That's a certain philosophy, a certain institution, certain type of sense enjoyment. We should think very philosophically based on Shastra how to see the reality of this situation. For many years, I was attached to the culture and the institution of science and academia. But now I can see by analyzing that it's all simply cheating and that people are saying things as if they're big, big scholars, but actually they don't know anything. One can analyze anything in this way. People are very attracted to material bodies. It is simply a hard shell that is covering so many detestable things inside. And one, to make people to make their bodies attractive, go put on oil and fry themselves in the sun. They're simply making stool pakoras. We should think in this way and understand that there is no enjoyable thing in the material world, that the only enjoyable thing is service to Sri Krishna. So we should become very philosophical. We all have experience. Everybody in the age of Kali has experience of the miseries of material existence. We don't have to wait for a situation like Maharaj Chitraketu's to arise. Just by living in Kali Yuga, we've already experienced so many detestable things. So we should meditate on these and uh, understand that our job is to get out. And as much as possible while we're here, help others get out as well. As we preach to people, all of them have experience as well. even if they hide it behind a veneer of, oh, life is wonderful, and uh, these so-called spiritual people might be like, oh, it's all the universe's plan, and uh, the good things are coming to me. People say that because they don't have any higher knowledge. If they were actually honest, they'd think about all of the times that they were disappointed or suffering or somehow or other in misery, and they'd be able to recognize. But they have to say all these things to cope because they don't have Krishna consciousness. So we should give ourselves Krishna consciousness and we should give others Krishna consciousness and actually make people happy. And part of that is telling them very strongly that this place is no place for a sane person. So we should get out as soon as possible by reviving our Krishna consciousness and acting in eternal relationship with Krishna, which is the only way that we can actually be satisfied in any situation, even in this material world. That if one is in unalloyed Krishna consciousness, has no thought other than to serve Krishna, then even the miseries of the material world will not cause one to suffer because one will stop identifying with the stool pakora of the body. That is simply a resting place of miseries. So I think I've made my point. We have about a bit less than 20 minutes left. I see somebody, Madhupan has her hand raised. So go ahead.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for class.
Hmm.
Some funny points. So I was wondering on the topic of moving ourselves around for a better material situation, like searching after some
Hmm.
material happiness in some way, or maybe a more pleasing situation in a different way. How is that different from when we do that in a spiritual consciousness? Like, oh, I'm not my it's not working right now in the spiritual situation. So if I move my material situation, maybe my spiritual life will improve. With the example of like the brahmachari is in the ashram and he's feeling disturbed and he wants like kind of feeling like he needs to get married. So the mentors are like, oh, well, okay, well, why don't you move out to like the grihastha ashram? So the situation's like changing materially for the betterment of the spiritual life. So is can you maybe you could just speak a little bit on that?
Yes. So this was the related to the point that I mentioned about Dharma. In the sense, one time during a personal darshan, Gurudev said to me, "Krishna conscious is the art of the practical." Uh, in the sense that it's not always possible to jump straight to pure Krishna consciousness. So we interact with the material energy in a way that keeps our spiritual life in the center. That even with the example that you gave of a brahmachari changing ashrams into the grihastha ashram, the point is that they're going to the grihastha ashram, not the grihamedi ashram. And if they're disturbed uh, in the brahmachari ashram, if they can't keep that ashram, uh, it's not because they're unattached to women. They're disturbed and wanting to change because they're attached to women and wealth and all of the things that come along with that. So then it's like, okay, you're attached in this way. Instead of being attached to women in general or every woman, choose one. choose one and then get married, and and then practice dharma in that way. The whole idea is that if one keeps one's spiritual life in the center, then by being married and moving through that ashram, one will see that it won't actually bring you happiness. And then one will lose one's attachment for those things. So if the attachment is already there, we have to think of a way how to mm, deal with that attachment in a way that is uh, most beneficial for our spiritual life, which is, the Van Ashram system. The whole Daiva Van Ashram system is managing our material designations and attachments in a way so that uh, they help us gradually rise instead of quickly fall. So yeah, that's the idea, is that if we have these attachments and they aren't going away anytime soon, then it's allowed to gradually purify them by the practice of the Dharma Dharma system, uh, rather than repression that will come out in other ways. So hopefully that clears things up a bit.
Thank you.
Hmm? Nagari?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you so
Bible.
much for that inspirational class on keeping
Thank you.
Krishna in the center and uh, developing a detestful attitude towards material sense enjoyment. My question relates to the, I guess, the trappings of knowing Jyotish. So, as a student, how do you navigate um, knowing that, okay, it's predestined, and then there's also the philosophy, or at least the approach to material life, of being lazy intelligent.
Hmm.
So, how do you avoid knowing Jyotish, or even if you don't know Jyotish, but one is in Krishna consciousness, and they could interpret lazy intelligence as being like, uh, I'll just stay in an ISKCON temple and depend on the temple president for my subsistence. Or not, one may not even think it that way, that I'm depending on the temple president, but I'm just going to depend on ISKCON.
Hmm.
Because, well, working a regular job or trying to establish one's own, one's own field of occupational income, you establish your own farm, or I don't know, you become like a nonprofit administrator and you subsist off that. That's more difficult because, well, it's just more favorable if I just center my life around attending morning program. And in this way, like, I'm avoiding the difficulties of occupational duties in the Grihastha ashram.
So yeah, it all depends on one's consciousness, in the sense that there's nothing wrong for brahmacharis to be supported by the temple. But the point, I've heard Guru Maharaj make the point before, that everybody has to adopt some responsibility in life. If one is in one of the renunciant stages of life, uh, either brahmachari, vanaprasth, or sannyas, uh, that responsibility comes as engaging in the preaching mission, uh, of pushing forward the practice of Krishna consciousness. So one's mentality should be, how can I get more people to take to the process of Krishna consciousness? How can I help relieve the suffering of these people? Or one can take the responsibility of the Grihastha ashram, where, of course, one should and can, and many do, still engage in the preaching mission. But there is also all the responsibilities of, having a wife, having children, having a griha, etc. So, Prabhupada said Krishna consciousness isn't for lazies and isn't for crazies. So everybody should take up a mission in Krishna consciousness, uh, of taking up some responsibility. And the management of the temple should try to encourage and induce people in that way of becoming absorbed in some sort of responsibility, some sort of mission. And in that way, try to overcome uh, the inherent laziness that people might have. And once again, this is uh, related or can be tied to the system of Daivavan ashram, in that if one is not practicing the brahmachari lifestyle, uh, meaning the 8 processes of brahmacharya, then one should be or be attempting to be, uh, one should be in the Grihastha ashram or be working on entering the Grihastha ashram. Everybody should take up some responsibility in life. And in this way, if one is any sort of honest person, one will rise to that responsibility and overcome the laziness and procrastination that is symptomatic of the mode of ignorance that is extremely prevalent today, as empowered by Kali Yuga. So hopefully that answered your question, Gary.
Thanks, Prabhu. So basically, one should be cautious of the material energy. So it's a good attitude to have that, okay, working in the secular world for demoniac corporations, it is going to compromise my sadhana. But at the same time, one shouldn't avoid the the call to absorption, as you said, and the call to really using all of your energies in the Sankirtan movement.
Yes, and there are different ways to do that. As in, sometimes, especially because we don't have the socio-economic system of Varnashram Dharma, where people can hmm, totally live in a simple living, high thinking way without so much connection with the outside world. Sometimes people have to take corporate jobs, especially if you're a grihasta. Uh, then you have a responsibility to support your wife and your children. And of course, generally, grihastas have grihas. Uh, but one can use any spare time that one has in Krishna consciousness, uh, in the preaching mission, and also if one has excess resources, one can give money to various projects. Give the results of one's actions, the fruits of one's actions to Krishna. And in doing so, it also becomes purified. And then also, one can determine or think of how one spends one time from 5 to 9, let's say. 9 to 5 might belong to some demoniac corporation. But when you get home in the evening, are you sitting down and becoming a vegetable in front of the TV? Or are you reading Krishna book, having kirtan, uh, things like that? So there are ways to that even if one is in a unfavorable situation by having to work for corporations that are simply run by demons, of arranging one's life as the most favorable way possible, given the practicalities, and advancing in Krishna consciousness that way.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. Maybe others would be more able to advise on exactly how to do that as, I'm not even in the Grihastha ashram yet, but moving in that direction. And at the beginning, maybe those who have or are reaching the end of their Grihastha ashram and are moving into the Vanaprasth, or already there stage can advise more and exactly how to do that. All right, in the last few minutes, are there any last comments, questions, objections, complaints? Okay, going once, going twice. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.